Good afternoon, and welcome to the Sebree Church of Christ. Glad that you've chosen to tune in today for our midweek short lesson. I want to begin by asking you a question. Do you find it sometimes hard to surrender? Just think about that for a few minutes. As I've entitled this lesson, Slow to Surrender. Have you ever noticed that surrendering to the Lord is a slow process? It usually begins with an admission that He is God and you are not. Something fairly obvious to the casual observer, but many times there is a long, winding road of denial and resistance before the truth finally breaks through our calloused heart. To establish itself firmly is the point for having an accurate estimation of ourselves and of God. Not that we don't make a pretense of believing with shows of religious activity and lip service to acknowledge God as creator or as the object of spiritual matters. We do this because not believing is more difficult than simply acknowledging His reality. Less leaving the heavy lifting of atheism for stronger souls who like to be defined by what they don't believe. Simply believing, however, is not the same as surrendering, because when one surrenders to God, He is no longer who He was. Believing in God may bring changes to one's lifestyle and even their thought process. But surrendering to God changes a person's soul. This is why the process is so slow. Giving up bad habits, changing opinions, or practicing religious rituals are all external things done in response to one's understanding concerning the demands of their religion. Surrender, on the other hand, brings about a change in who we are and how we identify ourselves. I want you to think about that seriously too. Surrender brings about a change in who we are and how we identify ourselves. It is so no wonder then that Peter and Paul and other spiritual writers of the New Testament referred to themselves as slaves or bondservants of the Lord, Romans 1 verse 1. This was not done out of false modesty. Theirs was an acknowledgement of the surrender that they had experienced because of their proximity to the living God made flesh in Jesus Christ. It is comforting for us to witness their sluggishness and at times grudging submission to God in the face of the overwhelming proof of Christ's divinity. Because this helps us. You see, we have some perspective and patience with our own slowness in finally giving up self in surrender to God. We as believers are often called upon to imitate Jesus and His exhortation, and His exhortation is usually carried out with an effort at improving our morals. It seems as a call to sin less rather than to surrender more, and in so doing we actually fail in both. The whole point of Jesus incarnation and sinless life was to atone for yours and my sinfulness. Once we have been justified by faith, which is expressed in repentance and in baptism, why do we continue to pursue this justification by renewed attempts at less sin? After all, was this not the reason Jesus had to come? Because we could not sin less? Better an exhortation for greater piety than less sin, because in attempting to care more about God and the things of God, which is the definition of piety, we are at least relating to God's directly, rather than having self as the starting point in an effort to try and commit less sin. You know, an example is, as I say to myself, I want to sin less. And all done in a futile attempt to improve our moral standing before God. Not that doing away with sinfulness is a bad thing. It's just that making this a goal negates my faithfulness that the exercise might produce. Reducing sin as a means, however, is a productive strategy in the surrendering of my soul to God, because in doing so, I am restoring the vision given to man before sin came into this world. A vision that allowed Adam to walk with God because he could see God and take in his majesty. Therein lies the reason for being slow in our surrender to God, the blindness that is caused by sin. If I could but see him in his glory, I would surrender to him immediately. And naturally, because of the joy I would have in knowing and seeing that which is thankfully and mercifully greater than I am. In other words, knowing that I am not God becomes a source of joy and eternal gratitude that would have the power to instantly dissipate all sin in me and free me from the bondage of pride that began when Lucifer first lifted up his heart before God, and has continued as every man blinded by sin refused to give God what he was due. Complete surrender. In alluding to this fact, Paul proclaims that at his coming, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. Philippians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. The Spirit promises that eventually everyone will surrender whether they want to or not. Thankfully, God is patient with us about our slowness to surrender. Since he is outside of time, our slowness does not provoke him as it does those who desire to bring their complete lives to him as a living sacrifice. In the end, for those in the slow process of surrendering, there is the constant cycle of knowing the monetary joy of being firmly held in his eternal grasp, followed by the familiar burden of being in the flesh. Only those surrendering know the watched feeling Paul describes as his body of sin in Romans chapter 7 and verse 24. The fatigue caused by the pull and the push of the internal battle, where the enemy doesn't want to quit, and the spiritual fight already won by Christ in us. A war of attrition, where the outcome is decided, but the damage continues to be inflicted simply for evil's sake. The comfort of the surrendered soul is that once decided, The slowness no longer works against him as it did when resisting the Spirit. Now the slowness of the process leading to complete surrender provides an opportunity to glorify God, because it is no longer I who lives within this slow to surrender and sinful body. It is Christ. And he not only lives in me, but will also finish the work of surrender that he began in me when I finally acknowledged the blessed fact that he was God and I was not. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 21, brethren, we need to surrender ourselves to God. We need to be in complete surrender to him, because it is through that he provides for us a more abundant life. Just think about these things throughout the rest of the week. And again, I'm so thankful that you tuned in. We're happy that you did. We would really be happy if you would attend worship services with us at the Sebree Church of Christ this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. We would love to have you there. Again, please share these videos with your friends and neighbors, and maybe we can help lead someone to Christ. And if you're out there and you need some help, if we at all possibly can, we would love to help you. The phone number that you can reach us at is 270-823-2335. Again, we're very thankful that you chose to tune in. Hope this message might help us to think a little bit, and hope you have a great rest of the week. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday at 10:30 at the Sebree Church of Christ. Thank you.